Out of the east, the patriarch Abraham came to settle in the land of Canaan. Abraham had 2 sons. Ishmael, the elder of the 2, born to the concubine Hagar, was banished to the desert. Abraham's wife, Sarah, gave birth to his 2nd son, Isaac, who was taken to Mount Moriah to be a sacrifice to his God on a stone altar which now stands beneath this golden dome. Millennia passed, and the sons of Abraham were destined to meet again, not in brotherhood, but in bitter struggle, enmity, and war over this, the Promised Land. Once a year, throughout the nation of Israel, everything comes to a halt. On the eve of Independence Day celebrations, this young country silently honors the fallen of 6 wars. Looking at the beauty of this historic city that traces its roots back to the very dawn of Western civilization, it is almost impossible to see how harm or hatred could ever be produced from within its walls. But these are just echoes of the old world, ghosts of generations that said Jews and Arabs must be enemies, for they have always been so. Perhaps then it is no coincidence that the concept of a lasting peace with the most vicious yet most vulnerable enemy of all, the Palestinians, was conceived.
There is no another partner to deliver the Palestinians. With the extreme Islamic groups, it means continuation of violence and terror alone without the hope through negotiation to find a solution. If there is any chance, and I'm not saying it is in the pocket for sure, if there is any chance, is with the PLO of Arafat.
I am coming here carrying in one hand the olive branch, and in the other hand the gun to protect the olive branch.
And after 2,000 years of exile and dispersion and suffering and loneliness and smallness, these Jewish people came back.
Many returned as survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, seeking refuge from a world that watched Hitler annihilate over 6 million European Jews. Seeking a new life in a promised homeland, they are stopped by a British blockade that keeps them out of Palestine by force. Inside the country, British soldiers fail to maintain peace between over 500,000 Jews and 1 million Arabs, each passionately pursuing their own dream of independence. With most Arabs violently opposed to even the concept of a Jewish state, tempers hover around boiling point. As transport and isolated settlements come under increasing Arab attack, life for the Jews of Palestine becomes impossible. In a belated attempt to avert the inevitable confrontation, the United Nations votes to end the British mandate.
Australia? Yes.
On November 29, 1947, Palestine was partitioned into 2 separate states, one Jewish, one Arab.
The Jewish community, the Zionist organization, accepted the partition plan. The Arab world rejected, and on the day that the resolution passed in the UN, the Palestinians started riots.
The following day in Jerusalem, 5,000 Arabs march out, burning and looting their way towards the Jewish commercial center. A bomb on West Jerusalem's busy Ben Yehuda Street leaves Jewish dead buried beneath the rubble. Arab snipers make daily life ever more precarious.
The War of Independence started first in a struggle against the Palestinians. They attacked isolated settlements, and the main roads to the Negev, to the Galilee, and to Jerusalem.
Setting out from the coastal plain, convoys of supplies make desperate attempts to run the gauntlet of continued Arab attacks. Jerusalem finds itself cut off.
In April 48, I appointed a brigade commander of the Harel, the Table Mount Brigade. They had to continue to fight along the road to Jerusalem, to clear the road and to prevent a siege on Jerusalem.
In a determined effort to preserve the dwindling reserves of water and food, rationing is now introduced among Jerusalem's 80,000 Jews.
On the 20th of April, we got an order to move to Jerusalem. Therefore, it was attached to bring about a convoy of 300 trucks that had to supply Jerusalem, and I was ordered to try to conquer and to liberate the whole Jerusalem. It was a very bitter fighting.
After heavy fighting, 1,500 Jewish soldiers managed to open the road and take control of strategic parts of Jerusalem. The British, busy with their own preparations for departure, are surprisingly quick to respond, issuing an ultimatum for the Jews to withdraw from their hard-won positions.
We didn't give in, but they attacked us with a battalion of the Black Watch, tanks, artillery, something that we didn't have.
This was to be one of the final acts of the British in Palestine. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaims the independence of the new Jewish state in the land of Israel. While the last British troops sail out of Haifa Bay, the new Israeli flag is raised over a port now guarded by the first boat in Israel's fledgling navy. But countrywide celebrations were short-lived. The Arab countries decided to attack. Within hours, Egyptian warplanes hovered over the skies of Tel Aviv, releasing their destructive cargo. The Lebanese set their sights on Haifa and Nazareth. Syrian tanks advance on the fertile farmlands around the Sea of Galilee. The Iraqis take up positions in Samaria, hoping to cut Israel in two. Jordan's Arab Legion surrounds Jerusalem. And 10,000 Egyptians cross out of the Sinai Desert to threaten Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. With the whole country a potential battleground, the citizens of Israel soberly joined up. The realities of giving birth to a new country in this volatile region will have dramatic impact on their way of life. Historic consequences which no one could foresee. A small arms industry is started, turning irrigation pipes into primitive mortars and homemade grenades, as the Jews impatiently await the arrival of weapons purchased abroad. Impatient, too, of conscripts swelling the ranks of the Arab Liberation Army. They come to join Iraqi General Fauzi al-Qaukji, who set up positions overlooking the Jezreel Valley, the legendary battlefield of Armageddon. The kibbutz settlements await imminent attack. In northern Israel, each settlement battles for its very existence. They have no choice but to repel the invading armies of Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. In the south of Israel, the Egyptian threat is even more ominous. Here, handfuls of barely armed defenders drive back wave after wave of attacks. Standing up to 5 days of Egyptian tank, artillery and air bombardment, the defenders of Kibbutz Yad Mordechai are finally forced to evacuate under cover of darkness. The Egyptians advance within 17 miles of Tel Aviv. After 2 weeks of bitter fighting, the turning point of the war comes when the first 4 aircraft arrive in Israel from Czechoslovakia. With no time for test flights, the first Israeli airmen take off to attack the Egyptian column. Although militarily ineffective, the surprise appearance of the planes sends fear into the Egyptian ranks. Israel then circles the Egyptian flank and mounts the first night counterattack offensive. This throws the Egyptians into total disarray, and all plans for further advance are dropped. Despite this major victory, Israel's situation remained critical.
And some very tough decisions were taken, for example, like sending newcomers who didn't have any military training, who didn't have even a suntan on their face, and sending them to fight at the entrance of Jerusalem.
Focus of the battle for Jerusalem was the police station of Latrun, a strategic stronghold overlooking the biblical battlefield of the Ayalon Valley. This fortress-like building, dominating the western entrance to Jerusalem, was securely in the hands of the Arab Legion. The Legion had orders from Transjordan's King Abdallah to occupy every inch of Arab Palestine, but his main ambition lay with the holy city of Jerusalem. Waves of badly planned and executed operations saw casualties mount daily for the Israelis. Their failure to dislodge the Legion from Latrun led to the ever-tightening stranglehold the Arabs held on Jerusalem. When word came of the fall of the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem's old city, morale hit rock bottom. After 2 weeks of the war's most savage fighting, the Jewish quarter surrendered. Over 1,000 ultra-Orthodox Jewish civilians, plus the few remaining fighters that had defended them, followed their rabbis out of the old city. With the city at the end of its limited supplies, the Israelis at last completed a road across the mountains and brought the first convoy in months to Jerusalem. The siege of the city was finally lifted. Over the months that followed, the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, was forged in fire to emerge as the well-equipped and organized fighting force that stamped its hallmark on Middle East affairs for almost the next half-century. Israel cleared the Galilee and the center of the country. Egyptian forces in the south were routed from the Negev and driven back into the Sinai Peninsula, while King Abdallah annexed the West Bank into his renamed Kingdom of Jordan. But Jerusalem remained a divided city, connected to the rest of Israel only by a slender umbilical cord. The fighting was over and armistice agreements were signed. Demarcation lines drawn on the map would be determined by future wars.
It was a very bitter, bloody war. My brigade suffered the highest number of casualties of all the brigades that fought in our War of Independence. That was the longest and the highest in terms of casualties of all the wars that Israel has fought since then.
The fighting left some 800,000 Palestinian Arabs homeless. They became the victims of a continuous struggle between Arab leaders' ambitions and Jewish survival in the region. These refugees were destined to become a core issue in the long-simmering Middle East conflict. Since its creation, the State of Israel has fulfilled a promise to be a safe haven for Jews around the world. In 1949, a tidal wave of refugees was speeding its way toward the shores of the new state. Tens of thousands arrive every month from the devastation of Europe or driven from their homes in Arab lands. Almost all come penniless to the Promised Land. The immigrants are housed in tent cities and makeshift camps spread throughout the country. The nation's flag flies high when Israel celebrates its first Independence Day parade. Jerusalem sees its first military parade of Jewish soldiers for over 2,000 years. Slowly, the country succeeds in building more permanent homes for the immigrants. New settlements spring up all over the country, some planned as urban centers, most as agricultural communities. Almost all are within walking distance of a border. It is across these borders that Arab Fedayeen guerrillas maintain a relentless stream of attacks on civilian targets. In March 1954, a bus is ambushed at the Scorpions Pass in the Negev. 11 holidaymakers are killed outright. Many others are badly wounded. As always, the tracks led back to the border. This contemporary Egyptian propaganda film shows the heroism of the Fedayeen, the victorious spearhead of the war against the Zionist enemy. The Israeli army mounts continuous action against the constant Fedayeen incursions. Retaliatory raids often take the IDF deep into Arab territory, striking at Fedayeen bases in Jordan and Egypt. In Egypt, at the same time, great social upheaval is underway. On a wave of popular support, Gamal Abdel Nasser leads a bloodless coup. King Farouk is swept into exile. Egypt becomes a republic, with Nasser promising widespread reform. Aiming for leadership of the whole Arab world, Nasser is quick to raise the battle cry against Israel. Negotiating a massive Soviet-backed arms deal with Czechoslovakia, Egypt gains a 4-to-1 weapons supremacy over Israel. Establishing a joint military command with Syria, and with young King Hussein of Jordan, Nasser confidently begins to move. His aim, the destruction of both the Jewish state and Western influence in the Middle East.